The beautiful thing about guitar is there are so many songs that can be played with a relatively small set of chords. Another plus, those chords are usually chords that new guitarists learn first. And that's what we're going over today in this lesson, the first 7 chords that I show new guitarists. Hi, I'm Joshua Kenson, and I love teaching people about this wonderful instrument, especially beginners. So if you're new to the instrument or it's been a while and you're scraping that rust off, you're going to want to subscribe. These 7 chords are such a great place to start. I would say easily hundreds upon hundreds of songs that you could play with these, if not thousands. All 7 of these chords are what we call open chords. And all that means is that we are including both open strings and some fretted notes as well. Although some of these can be a little tricky, they aren't as tricky as, let's say, bar chords, where you have to cover more than one string with one finger. We'll get to that in another lesson. If you watch my last video, you're already ahead of the game. The first chord that I usually show people is on this list, and it's E minor. E minor is a great first chord to start with because it includes all the strings on the instrument, so we don't have to omit anything, and it uses 2 of our stronger fingers, our second and third finger. So to form this chord, all we have to do is take our second finger and place it at the 2nd fret of the 5th string, and take our third finger and place it right underneath it at the 2nd fret of the 4th string. Now, one of the things that you might run into here is you don't want to be on top of the fret. We're trying to push the strings against the fret. So much like in the last video, we just want to be a little behind the fret, not on top of it, behind it. Now, that can be a little tricky. If you take a look here, you'll notice that my second finger, my middle finger, is actually a little further away from the fret than my third finger. And that's simply because they both can't occupy the same space. I need to make room for them both. So we just want to get as close to the fret as we can get without being on top of it. In terms of the amount of pressure that you want to use for these chords, for all of them, we are looking for the right amount of pressure, just enough pressure, not as much pressure as we physically can give. The reason for that is, as we get learning these chords and learning some songs, we're trying to preserve our energy. I know we're not jumping around here doing a whole lot of movements and stuff, but it is difficult playing a 2, 3, 4 minute song without stopping. So what we are looking for here is the right amount of pressure, not as much pressure as you possibly can provide. So again, I have that second finger on the 2nd fret of the 5th string and that third finger on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, and we're going to include the 6th string down. So I'm going to start with that 6th string and strum all the way through. Just like that. Next up, super simple. We just learned E minor. We might as well learn E major. The great thing is, there's only one difference between the two. So again, here's E minor, and all we have to do to form an E major is to take our first finger and place it on the 1st fret of the 3rd string. Same thing, 6th string down. So let's hear what those two sound like side by side. E minor, and then E major. Notice how E minor kind of has this more sorrowful, maybe melancholy type sound to it, whereas E major sounds a little bit more uplifting. So that E minor is very kind of maybe a little sad, you don't know what's going on with your life, don't know where to head. But maybe you get a little advice with that E major and it's a little bit more uplifting. I kind of know where I'm going now. Sounds good. Moving on to our next chord, A minor. The great thing about A minor, we've already learned it, kind of. Previously, E major, we have fingers in this formation on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th strings. Now, the great thing about A minor is all we need to do is take this exact shape and move them down one string each. So now instead of being on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th string, I am on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string. And then the only other difference on top of that is our root note, or our starting point for where we're going to strum, is on the 5th string instead of the 6th string. So we are going to want to include from the 5th string down. That is A minor. Now, what happens if you catch that 6th string? In this case, it sounds pretty good. That won't always work out, but in this case, if you happen to catch that 6th string with the A minor, it's still gonna sound pretty good. But really right now, we're trying to hone in on specifically what we are trying to express. It's not that if we accidentally include something, it's going to sound bad, but we should be doing things with intention. So when you play this A minor, for right now at least, try to only include strings from the 5th string down. Next up, A major. Now, this is the first case where I'm going to show you how to play this chord a couple of different ways using different fingers, okay? Now, the reason I do that is because everyone's different and some people are more likely to feel more comfortable with one than the other. Ultimately, we want to be able to play them all, but again, the point is to be able to get going playing some songs here, so we want to be able to form these chords as quickly as possible. A major's challenge is that it's all on the second fret, so we need to be covering the second fret of the second string, third string, and fourth string. Now there's multiple ways we can do that. The first way that I learned how to do that is like this. I take my third finger and put it on the second fret of the second string. I take my second finger and put it on the second fret of the fourth string, and then we take this first finger and wedge it in between both of them about midway back from the fret. No possible way we can get it right up against the fret because the other two fingers are in the way. And we are going to be on the second fret of the third string. So just like that. And just like A minor, the root note is on the fifth string, so we include every string from the fifth string down, 5 to 1. Now, a couple other very common ways I see this chord both taught and played. A lot of people I see play it like this. Their third finger on the second fret of the second string, so just like the other way we did it. And then our second finger on the second fret of the third string, so that's different. We had our first finger there on the last one. And then our first finger is on the fourth string at the second fret, just like this, all in a row. And you can kind of see that they are formed in more of a kind of diagonal line. Now, the reason I like the other formation better is because I get two fingers right up next to that fret as opposed to only one finger. Because if you see here, kind of diagonal this way, our first way, we get both of our third finger and our second finger right up against that fret, and then our first finger is the only one that's about halfway down from the fret. So again, both are absolutely correct. Play both of them, really, if you can. Learn both, because you will use both in different situations. But for right now, pick the one that feels better to you. One more bonus way to play A major, and this will become a lot easier once you kind of get familiar with bar chords, but you could also just take one finger, your first finger, and bar it all over 3. So I'm taking my first finger and barring it over all the strings, 2, 3, and 4, and then still strumming from the 5th string down. Now you notice it becomes very difficult to get your first finger out of the way so that first string also rings out, but it can be done. Just got to practice it a little bit. And that follows for any other finger too. I could do it with my second finger. I could do it with my third finger. Now, a lot of those aren't very practical, but in the end, you might find situations where those work out well for you. Now, the next 3 chords that we learn is really where everything's going to break loose. These next 3 chords add so much variety and are so popular in songwriting. But even with the ones that we've already learned, there are songs that can be played. Taking E minor and E major, for example, I believe that is a Badly Drawn Boy song. So you're going to see these very quickly apply to a lot of popular music. Next up, C major. So far, the chords that we've learned, all the fingers are kind of in a very close position to each other. This is the first one that we play that we're going to really test our stretching capability, okay? So how I generally teach this chord is by teaching it from an A minor to know the relationship between the 2 chords. It's also a very common chord change, A minor to C major. So if we take that chord A minor that we've already learned, all we're going to want to do is take our third finger that right now is on that third string at the second fret, and we're going to lift it up and reach over to the third fret of the 5th string. Same deal, both have the 5th string as its root note, so 5th string down. Right there, that is a C major. So again, A minor, moving to C major, we just lift up that third finger up to the third fret of the 5th string. That is the only difference. Something you might want to keep in mind as you make that chord change, and this really applies to any chord change, is we want loose and hard pressure at the same time. We need to be loose so we can move to the next chord in a timely fashion, and we want that secure pressure when we are holding down the chord and want to hear it ring out true. So after you play that A minor and you're ready to move to C major, you're going to want to release that tension in kind of all your fingers to allow yourself to reach out to that third fret of the 5th string. And you might even see your second finger readjust a little bit right there. It was kind of back here because it's out of the way of the third finger. As soon as I reach up, it kind of shoves closer to the fret if it can, just like that. So again, A minor, switch to C major. Now when you add a strumming pattern to this, much more musical. One more thing to think about though, I know I showed you this in relation to an A minor because it's a very common chord change and really one of the first chord changes that I show people. But you want to know C major for C major. Don't just think of it as in relation to A minor. So a lot of times, I learned this early on in teaching, I would show people an A minor and C major, and they'd come back the next week and be like, okay, play me a C major. And they would get on the A minor first and then make that adjustment. My fault. I showed them that A minor and how they need to move to that C major. What I failed to do for them though is tell them that they need to learn that C major for itself as well. Don't just relate it to A minor, learn C major for C major. Now we're on to G major, and this one is going to provide even further difficulty from that C major in the same way though. So that C major that we saw kind of added in this aspect of really stretching out. G major is going to take that even a little further, okay? So to form a G major, much like our A major and other chords, there are multiple ways to play this, but this is the first way that I show people how to play this. So we're going to take our first finger and put it at the 2nd fret of the 5th string. Then we're going to take our 2nd finger, put it right next to it on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. And here's the difficult part, or the more challenging part. We're going to take our ring finger, our 3rd finger, and bring it all the way down to that 1st string at the 3rd fret, right there. So we have quite the large gap here from the 2nd finger to the 3rd finger. And we include all the strings on this chord from the 6th string down. Our root note is G on the 6th string. Just like that. What we are looking for in all these chords that we are learning is clarity of the notes. So a good way to kind of check if you are getting everything ringing out is to take it note by note. The strums sound great, but what about individually? When we play each note individually, we're able to pinpoint any problems we may be having. For instance, if I go through this again, and I notice that that 5th string is not ringing out correct, I can see, okay, well, my 2nd finger is actually in the way. The pad of my finger is touching the 5th string below it, so I need to kind of arch my finger a little bit better. Now it's out of its way. I needed more pressure on that 1st string. So check your chords as you are playing them. Another very common way that a G major is played, same exact tones, but we are going to use, instead of our 1st, 2nd, and 3rd finger, our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th finger. Now the reason I don't show this one first is because it is now using our pinky, which is generally the finger that gives people the most problems. But it's also a very good introduction into using that pinky. So if you master that first way, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd finger, let's go ahead and try it too with our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th finger. So now our 2nd finger is at the 2nd fret of the 5th string. We're going to take our 3rd finger and put it on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. And then our 4th finger we're going to put at the 3rd fret of the 1st string. And again, check each note. That's what we're looking for right there. Playing G major this way is very helpful for numerous reasons. First off, now we have our 1st finger free. So as we start to get more into more advanced or intermediate ways of playing, now we have an extra finger that can do things back here. So it kind of allows us to do these melodies while we are playing the chord. Another advantage is a very common chord change is from G major to C major. So if I'm playing G major this way, my 2nd and 3rd finger are already in the right kind of position. They just need to drop down, and then I add in that 1st finger, lift off my 4th finger, and I'm into that C major now. So again, G major, C major. You can see where that's, maybe a little bit, I don't even know if easier is the right word, as practical than using this other way, which is still fine, but there's more motion from this formation of G major to C major than there is from this formation of G major to C major. Much less movement. And that goes back to what I was saying about conservation of energy. We are just making the smartest choice into the next chord. Our last chord on the list is D major. Now, much like our other ones, there are multiple ways you could play this, but I will say the way I'm going to show you right now is how I would say we're going to use it 90% of the time. So D major is formed by taking our 1st finger and putting it on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, right there. Then our 2nd finger at the 2nd fret of the 1st string, so right there, and then our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And this is the only chord that we've played so far where our root note is going to fall on the 4th string. We are going to omit 2 strings. We are omitting both the 5th and the 6th string. So we are strumming from the 4th string down. And you can kind of see where it's more of a triangle shape. Looks like a triangle pointing upward towards the neck here, right? The main pitfalls I see with this chord for people is this 3rd finger getting in the way and the pad touching the 1st string. So we might get something like this, where that 1st string isn't ringing out correctly. If you're feeling that, you'll feel the vibration of that 1st string on the pad of your 3rd finger. So you just want to arc that finger a little bit more, get it out of the way of that 1st string, and it's going to ring out correctly. So these last 3 chords alone, probably hundreds upon hundreds of songs use these, and only those. G, C, D is a very common type of chord pattern, kind of in any order that you put them in. G, D, C, kind of sounds like knocking on heaven's door. You can do D, C, very common. So you learn these and it just opens up a whole world of songs that you can play. And we're going to get into a lot of those on this channel. I have a bunch of song tutorials coming up as well, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't. Now I know I said 7 chords, but I have a bonus chord for you, and this one really just blows the roof off. If there was any doubt that you could play thousands of songs with those 7 chords, adding in this last chord, there is no doubt. There are thousands of songs adding in this last chord that you can play. And that last chord is F major. Now this is definitely a little bit more of a difficult chord depending on how you play it. So I often show different ways to play this chord depending on the student's level. If they're just starting out, we might just keep it at 3 strings. If they're a little, we've kind of gone through the basic chords already and we encountered it in a song, we might try to play it like this. We might try to play it like this. And then finally the hard one, or the hardest one I would say, is we get into bar chords. It's usually our first introduction into a bar chord as well. So today I'm going to show this in a very basic way. I'm going to give you 2 ways to play it, and then depending on how I'm feeling, maybe a 3rd way. Okay, so the first way I'm going to show you is by taking our 1st finger and putting it on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, our 2nd finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret of the 4th string. Now let's think back to some of those other chords we played. This looks very much like another chord that we learned today. Any guesses? That's right, C major. So a very easy way that you could think about this chord is think of a C major, and then we're just going to take our 2nd and 3rd finger and move them down a string apiece. Just like that. That is an F major right there. Now if we want to expand on this a little further, a little extra difficult thing that you can do, if you can, now take your 1st finger, instead of using the tip of your finger, like I have it here, we're going to use kind of the side of our finger. And we are now going to do what's called bar. We're going to bar over 2 strings, okay? Think of your finger as a bar. We're going to bar over that 1st and 2nd string. Then we're going to have the tip of our finger for that 2nd finger and the tip of our finger for that 3rd finger. That allows us to get 4th string to the 1st string. And like I said, countless songs now that you can play. That F major really just is kind of the missing key to a lot of songs out there. I mean, everything from, David Bowie's Space Oddity. Now I might play it with a bar chord. More expanded way. And then we have other chords that we learned. C major, E minor, C major, E minor. So with these 7, 8 chords alone, you have so much material to work with to keep you going for a long time. And then what you do as you encounter a new song that you're trying to play, and you let's say have 5 out of the 6 chords that are in there, and you encounter a new one, it just keeps adding to what you're able to play, right? So you just keep adding to that chord library that you have. So that's going to do it for this one. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. And if there's anything I can do for you, any questions you may have, please let me know with a comment down below.